GamingBolt presents 15 biggest Xbox fails that Microsoft wants you to forget. Over the past decade and a half, the Xbox brand has become a household name. And considering the fact that when Microsoft entered the market, they were going against two Goliaths of PlayStation and Nintendo, and Xbox's current brand value is a testament to some great work done by Microsoft over the years. From top-notch console shooters to truly interactive online gaming, there's a lot that the Xbox consoles have pioneered and perfected. But that shouldn't take away from the fact that there's also a lot that Microsoft has gotten wrong. Here in this feature, we're going to take a look at 15 of the biggest Xbox fails that we simply cannot erase from our memories, no matter how hard we try. Red Ring of Death. Let's kick things off with the best or worst, depending on how much you've suffered at its hands. The Red Ring of Death was truly the stuff of nightmares. This fiend could rise from the depths of hell and twist its slimy fingers around your beloved Xbox 360 without warning and out of nowhere. The Red Ring of Death claimed the lives of many Xbox 360s, and the constant fear of its ever-present looming threat was an absolute menace. We try with all of our energies to forget this intense trauma, but like so many other nightmares we wish had never happened, its existence cannot be erased. Xbox 360, the destroyer of discs. Every time you put your discs in the earlier models of the Xbox 360, it was like sending them to war. You just didn't know if they would come back in one piece. The Xbox 360 was prone to absolutely destroying discs in its drives at the slightest touch. If you ever even made the mistake of placing your console in an upright position and then accidentally tipping it over while it was still running, you could kiss whatever disc was inside goodbye. There was nothing more devastating than the heartbreak of having to buy the new Halo 3 times. Unless it happened while you were in the middle of the Cortana mission on Legendary difficulty, that could drive you insane. Xbox 360 Core. Remember the Xbox 360 Core? Microsoft released the lowest variant of the Xbox 360 at an incredibly cheap price, and people bought them in droves. But there was a reason they were so cheap. They had been stripped of almost everything that was essential. They came with no hard drives, no Wi-Fi, and even the controller wasn't wireless. You had to purchase everything externally and couldn't connect to the internet without a LAN cable. Truly a console of the Stone Ages. Charging money to change your gamertag. Gamertags and avatars are social gaming identities. The face of Microsoft and Xbox's revolutionary online gaming model. Also, in some ways, a way to squeeze every last drop of cash out of you. Over a decade ago, the idea of having to pay money to be able to play online via Xbox Live already seemed scandalous. We've warmed up to it a great deal now, though it does still sting. But Microsoft went a step ahead and told you that if you wanted to change your Xbox Live gamertag, you'd have to pay them extra for that as well. Sure, Microsoft, why don't you just charge us every time we turn the console on? Seems reasonable, right? Locking apps behind Xbox Live. Xbox Live was a great way for Microsoft to make a shitload of money, and in a lot of instances, way more than anyone would be comfortable with, it involved unfair practices on Microsoft's part. Take this entry for example. Back during the days of the Xbox 360, apps like Netflix, Hulu, and HBO Go were locked behind Xbox Live subscriptions. It's as if Microsoft just couldn't fathom the idea that people would cry foul at having to pay money to access apps that were already paid. Credit to them for dropping this practice eventually by the time the Xbox One rolled around, but really, Microsoft, why do something like this in the first place? Kinect. The success of the Wii was both a blessing and a curse. It was a blessing because it opened the doorway to motion controls. It was a curse because it opened the doorway to motion controls. Sony decided to cash in on what ultimately ended up being nothing but a very popular gimmick with a Wii remote copycat, PS Move. Microsoft went one step further and weighed in with the Kinect, and to be honest, back when it was revealed, the Kinect seemed like a pretty nifty concept. The idea of gaming purely based on motions and movements of your body and limbs, with no need for a controller at all, seemed really interesting, at first. Then there was no real support for the Kinect, and though it proved to be a useful little accessory, it just couldn't gain traction as a serious piece of gaming hardware. Microsoft did not give up though. Kinect for Xbox One. We're now in Xbox One territory, and it's an absolute goldmine. Let's start with Kinect for Xbox One. Microsoft were encouraged by the commercial success of the Kinect for the Xbox 360, and when the time came around to release a new console, they had a lot of, well, let's call them innovative ideas. They came out swinging with a new Kinect, or at least they thought they did. Kinect for the Xbox One blew up in their faces. It was a follow-up that no one wanted, to an accessory that no one wanted. It was, as per their original plans for the Xbox One, no longer supposed to be an accessory, but rather something that was integral to using your console. It would always be on, allowing you to make commands via its microphone and using gestures. Sounds cool, right? Well, it would automatically also take visual data on you through its camera and send it to Microsoft when needed, taking it from cool to pretty creepy. People were practically being forced to pay extra for the Xbox One because it came with a Kinect, which brings us to our next point: Xbox One price reveal. When Microsoft announced in 2013 that the Xbox One would launch at a price of $499, it was a little hard for everyone to believe, especially since the PS4, a much more powerful system, was being sold at significantly cheaper prices. It almost seemed like a repeat of the PS3 launch fiasco. What made that ridiculous price tag even harder to swallow was the fact that Microsoft was bundling all of their Xbox One systems with Kinect, which was essentially what was making the price skyrocket this way. It was ridiculous that people had to pay so much extra money because they were being forced to purchase a Kinect with it, even though there was a very good chance that they had already purchased the accessory for the Xbox 360. That, of course, was tied to a much larger problem. Always online Xbox One. Man, the Xbox One reveal was an absolute shit show. Sure, we guess we have to give credit to Microsoft for trying something new rather than just following the industry trends, but surely they could have tried something better, right? They announced that the system had a ridiculous requirement, that it always had to be connected to the internet. If it wasn't connected for more than 24 hours, you would be locked out of some pretty crucial features, like cloud saves. If you tried accessing your account from someone else's system, you'd be locked out of the software library tied to that account. These were just a few examples of this ridiculously overbearing requirement that, for some reason, Microsoft thought would have been a good idea to impose on all of their customers. The resulting backlash was like nothing they could have ever imagined, and they were eventually forced to do a complete 180 on these insane policies. But wait, there's more. No used games on the Xbox One. The internet and Microsoft's direct competition, Sony, had an absolute field day with this one. As if the disasters of the ridiculous pricing, the compulsory Kinect bundling, and the always online policies weren't enough, Microsoft decided to also put in place an insane policy that restricted the usage of used disc-based games on the Xbox One. The system required regular online authentication checks for used games, and that, along with all of the restrictive policies Microsoft put in place, meant that something as simple as lending a game to a friend became extremely complicated. Microsoft did eventually end up backtracking on this policy as well, but the outrage that broke out on the internet will never be forgotten. It didn't help that the unveiling event for the Xbox One was an absolute snooze fest. Looking back at the conference, you'd think that Microsoft had completely forgotten the primary purpose of the Xbox One and that it was supposed to be about playing video games. Microsoft decided to try and market the system as the go-to multimedia hub for every household, and frankly, it just backfired. All they talked about was how you could stream your favorite TV shows, how you could use different kinds of apps in different ways, and how you could check your fantasy league teams, and almost everything else on the face of the planet that had next to nothing to do with, actually playing your video games. Mishandling of Rare. Donkey Kong Country, Killer Instinct, GoldenEye 007, Perfect Dark, Banjo-Kazooie, Conker's Bad Fur Day. What do all of these games have in common? They're some of the greatest games ever made, remembered as landmark titles in the gaming industry. They were also all developed by Rare. Under the ownership of Nintendo, Rare were beasts, pumping out one classic after another. And under Microsoft, they were turned into a shadow of their former selves, occasionally developing the odd, decent game, but mostly assigned to just, looking back nostalgically at the golden days. It's a good thing Sea of Thieves looks as good as it does, because there's very little things we miss more than a Rare game that is at its absolute peak. Original Xbox controller. The Xbox 360 and the Xbox One controllers may be among the best video game controllers you will ever see, but the original Xbox controller was a nightmare, a monstrosity that required the hands of a giant to be held properly. You could bash someone's skull in with this thing. It was massive, it was weirdly shaped, and it had an ugly round blob at its core. It was just, wrong in all ways. It's almost hard to imagine that the predecessor to the Xbox 360's controller was this ungainly. Going from the Xbox controller to the Xbox 360 was a massive leap, almost like going from Killzone to Killzone 2. Xbox SmartGlass. Sure, in essence, the SmartGlass was a unique idea, one that Nintendo took one step further with the Wii U. But the Wii U failed hard, showing the flaws in this concept, and it makes sense that SmartGlass isn't doing very well either. There's just no real practical use for such a thing. The few uses it does have are distractions and neat little ideas, but that's all they are, and sadly, it looks like that's all they ever will be. Scalebound. The freshest wounds hurt the most, so it makes sense that we would finish this list with this point. And it hurts so much. Scalebound was supposed to be the big, awesome Xbox One exclusive that everyone was looking forward to, the one game that excited people regardless of which console or developer they owed their allegiance to. The Platinum-developed RPG was coming along so nicely, or at least that's how it seemed. The game was ultimately canceled earlier this year after years of anticipation. Some wounds even time cannot heal, and this is going to be one such wound. And that'll be about it for this one. If you guys like what we're doing at GamingBolt, please consider subscribing to our channel, and I'll see you guys on the next video.